Tonkadarian ship was small, but very nimble, and for its size, well armed. Chasing after such a ship in the rings of a gas giant is a great challenge. You never know when you can suddenly turn from a hunter into a game, if the Tonkadarian commander has enough brains and courage to lurk behind a big rock and ambush you with a weighty torpedo. But we had no choice. If this bastard manages to get to the hypernode on the system's edge and slip away to the main forces of the Tonkadarians, our entire task force will be in trouble. So I've been working my ass off, trying not to miss the fast ship. It seemed to be a scout corvette with a reinforced propulsion group, but I had a fast enough scout too. We darted between huge rocks while both ships' defense shields flared up occasionally, burning or throwing off small space debris. It was pointless to fire plasma cannons in such a maze, and it was crazy hard to keep the corvette in sights long enough for the hypervelocity missiles to target it. Eventually, the Tonkadarian made a wrong move, or rather, he just caught some bad luck. Suddenly, he jumped into a relatively clear space devoid of large debris, and I followed him. There, in the open, he could dance all he wanted. I was about to get him. The outline of the corvette turned green on the target screen, and my finger went to the launch button. I know that some originals program their hypnators to have some pretty strange wake-up complexes. For example, a passionate kiss from a hot beauty or something else along those lines. I've even known one thrill-seeker who died heroically in most of his dreams, but I always preferred the simple and logical conclusions of the hypnoter program. So it was all the more surprising to me when an unknown force ripped me out of the pilot's seat and tossed me straight into a pool of icy water. I floundered, instinctively opened my mouth, took a gulp of scalding cold substance, and woke up. Of course, it was an urgent call from the boss, the downside of being a special investigator. You have a lot of free time between business trips, but it can end overnight when your boss decides to send you to some galactic back alley, and now I owe one to Stefan. Because I had no doubt that it was Stefan who had reconfigured my Hypnotor emergency call termination procedure. He'd just returned from the Mechazoid zone, and every other civilization there, including biological ones, was eyes deep into this spooky cyber stuff. He'd probably done it during our monthly poker with the guys over the weekend. The red dial tone on the communicator panel stubbornly kept blinking. Oh yeah, you can't get rid of my boss that easily. Otherwise, he wouldn't be the boss. Man, did you sleep in the washing machine? The boss asked as soon as I pressed the receive button, and his disgruntled face appeared on the screen. I yawned. I'm so wet. Exchanging stupid jokes was part of our obligatory communication ritual with the boss. No, you're so crumpled. I waited patiently. Well, we're having trouble with a lawsuit in the Gamma sector, the boss finally said. There's something wrong with the plaintiff, and our inspector there sent piles of crap instead of proper data, and then he disappeared. So get ready. You'll go check it out and figure out what's going on. I've already booked you on the next FTL flight out that way, leaving tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? I was scheduled to meet an extremely attractive female tomorrow. Almost humanoid, at least in all the right places. Tomorrow, the boss said, with his steel version of the voice. We've got an audit committee around our necks, and if they think we're dragging our feet on standard claims, we're in trouble. I'll get rid of them eventually, of course, but until then, we need to keep a lid on things. So pay off all your debts, cancel all your dates, and be on a shuttle to the hypernode station by midnight. How did you... I started, but quickly shut up. Of course, the boss knew how I was spending my vacation. He always knew these things. That's why he's boss of the Bureau of Intelligent Species Registration. The hypernode station was in chaos, as usual. This must have been what the pre-Big Bang universe must have looked like. The local hub connected at least a few dozen hyperspace wormholes, so traffic through it was more than busy. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of intelligent beings, organic and inorganic, natural and artificial, stood, wandered and hurried in every possible direction. Anyone unaccustomed to such a sight could easily get confused and lost here, and a lot of first-timers did. The hub's administration even kept several AIs on duty, specially trained to detect signs of confusion in the behavior and faces of tens of thousands of officially certified intelligent species, provided they had faces, of course. But I was completely unaffected by all this. I had seen all sorts of unusual intelligent species in my career, and I knew the station like the back of my hand. After all, I'd lived in the system for almost 10 years, practically since I joined the Bureau. I was still 2 hours away from boarding my FTL. The pubs and cafes were all crowded, so I abandoned the idea of sitting in one of the cozy side establishments for a glass or two of Tolmadian Blue. I dodged a huge, self-propelled container of chloro-breathing swarmers from Causen 5 and headed toward my gate. I wondered what had happened in the Gamma sector that the boss had to pull me out of my vacation, well-deserved, by the way, and throw me to the next arm of the galaxy. He sent me an encrypted data pack, but I haven't checked it yet. I hate to learn the circumstances of an assignment on the fly. You have to look at everything carefully to soak it all in, and for that, you need at least a day, or better 2, depending on the case's complexity. Just as long as it would take the Express FTL to Shemengol, the central hub of the Gamma sector, to reach its destination. The last time I had to fly out in such a hurry, I ended up with the additional registration of 3 new intelligent species and the arrest of the chief inspector of the local department, who was making a good living on bribes from the dominant civilization of the sector. The guys didn't want to lose their pathetic empire, some 1.5 dozen star systems at most, just because they were hit by another pulsation of the Great Singularity. And now, according to the galactic law, they were obliged to grant independence to all planets inhabited by the species with newfound intelligence of the 3rd stage. Then, however, it turned out that one of those species had been on the 3rd stage for a long time, which added another 5 years to the prison term of that greedy inspector. Yeah, it is what it is. Our office is a government agency like any other, and it's staffed by regular, ordinary individuals with all their inherent weaknesses. Things happen. Anyway, by the time the FTL arrived at the place, I already had a general idea of what I was going to work with. Or rather, I had no idea at all, because what I'd read was only worth a couple of hydrogen atoms at most. 6 months ago, a lawsuit was filed from a system on the outskirts of the Gamma sector to declare the population there intelligent. It was an ordinary claim, the kind we get a lot of, just a standard 5-page form. Such claims are processed by the regional offices of the Bureau on a routine basis unless there are any complications, of course. A Bureau inspector is dispatched to the coordinates on the form to check it out. Again, this is the usual procedure. It's not formal, though. The claims are rejected in about 30% of cases. Ever since the Great Singularity began spreading intelligence throughout the galaxy, the procedure has been worked out to the last detail. But still, some cranks try to cheat us. Most often, it happens under the cover of supposedly very non-humanoid civilizations. All sorts of exotics like energy swarms, living stars, and the like. At one time, it was trendy to try to sell a fake virtual mind. But our AIs snapped such cheap scams like peanuts, and the wave quickly ceased. Of course, non-humanoids of the 7th degree and above have to act through a legal representative who can somehow understand both sides, which gives a great opportunity for all kinds of manipulation and cheating. After all, no one can predict exactly who, or even what, will be dragged into a sentient state by the next pulsation of the Great Singularity. I have already worked on registering intelligent coral polyps from the acid oceans of Manthiod and giant swimmers from the gas giant's upper layers in the Asmodea system, and these are not the most exotic cases. Benefits for races that just started on the path of intelligence, or rather been thrown there by the singularity, are a tidbit. You got the money allowance, various benefits, and free provision for those who can leave their habitat of transportation to the nearest hypernode. To say the least, there is a lot to take advantage of. That's why we exist, investigators on special cases of the Bureau of Intelligent Species Registration. Judging by the application, the Singularity snagged another distributed computer network this time. At first glance, it's no big deal, especially since there was not even any trouble expected from the network owners. That is the civilization that developed and used this network. This happens all the time, by the way, and causes a lot of complications. Just imagine that your tablet, stereo TV, or some other gadget suddenly declares that it is now part of the collective mind, or many virtual minds, and therefore is not going to blindly fulfill all your wishes. And in general, you can no longer consider it your property because slavery is forbidden in all civilized worlds of the galaxy. In such cases, our work is often not to collect evidence of intelligence, but to work out compromises between the old civilization and new sentient entities. We have already gained a lot of experience in this, so, as a rule, everything goes more or less smoothly. But this time, the computer network had no formal owner because it was part of an old abandoned space station system of the civilization that had passed to a transcendent level of existence, where such trifles of life as technical devices completely lose meaning. It was a grid consisting of tens of thousands of processors hibernated in eternal electronic sleep until the universe decided that it was about time for them to wake up, and wham! Sent them another pulse of the Great Singularity. Then, the computer network, using its fresh self-consciousness, somehow reached the local inspector of the Bureau and, through him, formulated its lawsuit. At least, that's how the case initially appeared. No big deal, a completely run-of-the-mill proceeding. But then, some nonsense began, which became more and more nonsensical with each new turn of events. The initial application was for a single computer intelligence of the distributed type, the standard form of existence for intelligent virtual networks. When our bureaucratic machine grasped the application with its jaws and started processing, the inspector sent a clarification. The basic formation should have been changed to collective computer intelligence of distributed individual type, a multitude of individual intelligent devices which can unite at will into a single supra-intelligence, all at once or only in parts. Our officials said, "Ugh," threw all the preparations in the trash and started the process again, and at the same time sent an angry letter to the inspector, who was obviously confused and changed the terms of the application on the fly. After that, the mess only became thicker. At first, the inspector didn't answer anything. Then he sent a message that everything had been done properly, and he didn't understand what the central office of the Bureau was dissatisfied with. Then, he was silent, for a long time. Finally, the office received a note that the new intelligent entity declared itself completely independent, keeping the inspector as an honorary vassal and trophy. In case of any foul play, it will consider itself entitled to declare war on the galactic community. That was absolutely ridiculous, but someone had to find out what the hell was going on, and as always, that someone turned out to be me. From the hypernode to my destination point, I was given a ride by a Leviathan living ship of the Cautol Bio-Commonwealth, who kindly agreed to make a detour. These guys have a wonderful personality and friendliness, and their clone community crews are usually quite humanoid in shape, so that even in the innards of an intelligent living creature a kilometer long, you don't feel like some ancient character swallowed by a monster. He delivered me directly to the place, along with the in-system ship that we took from the local bureau base, and even offered a clone escort for the time of my investigation. I refused, of course, and we agreed that the Leviathan would wait for me on the system's outskirts. As I entered the inner system, which was now supposed to be the sovereign home of the new intelligent species, even if it had not yet been certified by the Bureau, I immediately thought something was amiss. Of course, Like all races going into transcendence, the former inhabitants had cleaned up the mess. First, it concerned production facilities, ships, and the like. No one wants their inheritance picked up by the wrong dudes and used for some interstellar outrage. They didn't do the same with the computers, probably because they hadn't used them for a long time. The network was hopelessly outdated by their standards, but the Great Singularity didn't care. Once its pulsation caught something, there's no way back. Once we had to deal with a very unusual lawsuit in which the plaintiff could not be identified at first, and only after a lengthy investigation, it turned out that it was not 6 completely different species on the planet who became intelligent, but internal parasites that used these species as carriers. And yet, you expect at least some activity from the new technological mind. First of all, in the data flows, of course. But there was complete silence on all possible ranges. Usually, such minds are trying to establish some technological base to fix more or less efficient power supply of their main units, some production of drones and small devices and whatnot. All virtual minds at the initial stage of development are actively researching the surrounding world because for them, new information is like food and water for us. But here, everything looked completely dead and lifeless, just like right after the original master's departure. The energy level was barely noticeable, just as it should be in long-term permanent preservation mode. I flew around a few stations and satellites, constantly trying to establish contact with both the inspector and the alleged plaintiff, that is, the new mind, all to no avail. It was a typical system of civilization gone transcendent. It was as if the house owner had thoroughly cleaned up after himself and gone on a journey with no intention of coming back. After half an hour of careful scanning, I found the inspector's ship docked at one of the stations, in orbit around the gas giant, the system's 6th planet. The ship didn't answer any broadband or direct beam calls. That doesn't leave me much choice. I'd have to go there myself. Theoretically, it could be dangerous. I didn't know exactly how. I couldn't take any space pirates seriously. I mean, come on, guys. We're in the real world, not some cartoon channel. But the damn inspector had disappeared somewhere, hadn't he? And my job, pretty well paid, by the way, is investigating such strange situations. Anyway, I hit the thrusters on full, and soon I was docked with one of the station's airlocks next door to the inspector's ship. The first thing I did, of course, was checking the inspector's ship, to found nothing. Nothing and no one. Of course, the ship's airlock was locked, but as one of the Bureau's special investigators, I have master access to all the Bureau vehicles, and some others too. I was ready to see anything, up to those stupid pirates, and even brought a pulse gun just in case. But the reality was much more boring. Just an empty, abandoned ship. The first serious surprise awaited me when I tried to extract evidence from the ship's logbook. The surprise was that I failed. The logbook and all information from the ship's system had been erased. I looked puzzled at the dead screen of the master console. Until now, I had never suspected that it was possible to erase the logbook. I had never heard of such a thing. That's actually its main purpose, to reconstruct from the logbook what happened, even if the only thing left of the ship is a supercrystal trapped in a quantum pod on which the logbook is recorded. But all the ship's memory banks were empty, like the void between the galaxies. A search of the rest of the ship, including the inspector's personal belongings, yielded nothing either. Where the hell did he go? And then I slapped myself on the forehead. Or rather, on the spacesuit's visor. I didn't take it off even on the inspector's ship, just in case. How could I forget? The beacon. There was an atmosphere on the station, but not really breathable, which meant that the inspector had to leave the ship in a spacesuit. Every spacesuit has a small beacon by which the wearer can be easily detected. It is impossible to disable or remove the beacon because it is a primitive device, embedded deep into the back oxygen tank casing. Barring the possibility that the inspector simply jumped out of the airlock naked, I should have spotted him in no time. And I did. The station was relatively small, but it was equipped with gravity generators. The gravity was around standard, and that was fine. I hate weightlessness. Humans were designed to walk, not float around like balloons. I won't take up your time with descriptions of the interiors, especially since there was nothing special about them. A little different from ours, but overall, it was typical technology of an advanced humanoid civilization, mostly either disabled or out of service due to advanced age. From what I could see, the station had been some sort of research facility in the past. If there was anywhere that the essence of the alleged plaintiff, the virtual intelligence, should have been, it was here. But the station was much more like a crypt than a functional facility. I found the inspector, or rather what was left of him, in the center of a spacious round room. A mummy in a spacesuit sat with its back against some sort of small protrusion. The fact that it was a mummy was clearly visible through the helmet's visor from a distance, as the dead man's head was turned to face the entrance. I remember well how I approached the inspector, wondering what could have happened to the poor fellow. The simplest explanation was the depressurization of the spacesuit. The local atmosphere had impurities that were very poisonous to humans, but this in no way explained all the strange events that had been happening for quite a long time. Maybe he was only a little poisoned at first, and it affected his mind. But what about the alleged new intelligent entity? Pondering all this, I walked over to the inspector's body and tried to lay it on the floor to examine the spacesuit, but it appeared as if it were tied to a bollard. Looking closer, I saw that some kind of gray cord was extending from the helmet, and seemingly even from the inspector's skull, from the left side of the back of his head, and into the wall of the bollard. What the... I had time to think, and at that moment, the station turned on. It was those cheerful clones from the Leviathan that got me out of there. I have to give him credit. For a creature that doesn't use any manufactured equipment, preferring to grow everything necessary inside himself, he realized pretty quickly that those crazy streams of data, which suddenly burst in all directions from my ship, indicate that things went south. The Leviathan immediately launched 2 high-speed biomodules with a crew of 10 clones each, and in an hour they were on the station. In another hour, I was on board, or should I say in the belly, of the Leviathan, hurtling away from the system where the 2 bureau ships docked to the damned station now remained. I asked the Leviathan, through the clones of course, if he could hit the station with something, preferably as destructive as possible. Of course, he said he doesn't do things like that because it's out of his character. I didn't know then that it wasn't that important and that the inspector, using my ship as a super powerful transmitter, had caught himself in a trap from which he had no way out. Because it was all about the inspector from the start. There was no virtual mind supposedly awakened by the pulsation of the Great Singularity in the case from the beginning. The inspector had sent a fake application when he came across the transformation station left by the system's former owners. And then everything unfolded according to the cunning plan he had drawn up. Well, almost. Apparently he'd been off the rails for quite some time now. When you're constantly dealing with the strangest variations of sentient beings and trying to find common ground with the galactic community, it can happen. There's a reason all inspectors are required to take a year of psychological rehabilitation every 3 years. But this guy had somehow avoided it for almost 10 years, and it hit him back. We'll never know why he decided that the experimental station for digitally uploading intelligence was a portal to transcendence. The guys who built it were smart. They played around a bit, realized that it was a dead end, and went the other way. It's too bad they didn't think to destroy the station. It didn't occur to them that a crazy inspector with delusions of grandeur might stumble upon it one day. So the poor fellow uploaded his consciousness into the station's digital core, waiting for... I don't know what for. Probably something incredible. Great, unfathomable, transcendent. Instead, He found himself in the digital prison. That obviously didn't help his already twisted psyche. He couldn't transmit his consciousness through the ship's transmitter, as the channel was too narrow. So he started his campaign to lure the means to get out to the big world. Funny thing, but he had estimated everything correctly. All these ridiculous messages were bound to lead sooner or later to the arrival of a special investigator at the station. We always have an excellent transmitter on our ships, even non-jumpers, which allows us to contact the head office in case of emergency. He even took into account that among investigators, it is considered a bad manner to use a transmitter on trifling occasions, and we always try to conduct investigations at our own discretion, not consulting our every step with the head office. The most paradoxical thing about this whole story is that his plan basically worked as intended. Only the inspector, who suddenly started dreaming about how he would take over the entire galaxy, or how he would become the basis for a single, all-galactic mind, or God knows what he dreamed up, did not take into account that the upload station would take his instructions literally. The human mind is pretty cool, complex, and versatile, but even it can't control several quadrillion electronic devices. And that's exactly how many digital recipients the upload station loaded the inspector's infinitely fragmented consciousness into. It managed to cram it even into the AIs, many of which did not even notice this micro-invasion of the digital parasite. So weak was the inspector's digitized mind, divided almost into infinity. What a dead end. Even the impulses of the Great Singularity would not save him. They only give the potential species an initial impetus to intelligence, while the inspector remained formally sentient. And if you start erasing his fragments or disconnecting the devices where the station has recorded him, he will not reassemble, but will just lose himself by all those tiny fractions. Sometimes I even feel sorry for him. Being omnipresent, omniscient, and absolutely powerless is one hell of a resource over allocation.